My name is Amanda. I am a junior. I live in Maryland, and I'm very interested in STEM. I particularly love biotechnology and vaccine development. So I'm really excited about STEM. I first got really into STEM when I had an amazing 8th grade science teacher, and yeah, I've loved it ever since. So I'm really excited to be here.
And I'm Erica. I'm also in a junior, but I live in Illinois. And my STEM interests, I've always been like a science and math girl. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do, but it's not biology for sure. So like chemistry, physics, one of those. Um, and yeah, and that's us.
Well, it's great to meet you both. As you know, my name is Gabby González. I'm a director of STEM education initiatives, and I also am operations manager for the foundation, for the Intel Foundation. My background, educational background, is in engineering mostly, except my last degree, which was at Arizona State, is in social science. So I departed from the technical a little bit more into the, engineering, into a little bit more of the social sciences. And I spent half of my career in engineering, and it's turning out the other half is more leveraging that knowledge in engineering to see how we can get more women and people of color represented in the specifically engineering and computer science fields.
Oh, wow. Um, wow. I mean, it's incredible, but I guess we'll start at the basics first. What initially like piqued your interest in the field or just in STEM in general? Like what made you realize that like STEM was made for you?
Wow, that's a really good question. I always say that engineering found me instead of the other way around. I had no clue growing up what engineering was about. I'm an immigrant, so I came to the US when I was 13, and I didn't speak a word of English at the time. And I started junior high in Texas, and then my family moved to Washington, where I did high school. But even in high school, I struggled a bit with the language part. Interestingly enough, I was in AP English, even though English was my second language. So in high school, my family, when we came to the US, we came from a middle class family in Mexico. And when we came to the States, it was my mom and 5 children. And so we were welcome into the United States through the welfare system. And so we had, public housing and food stamps and all the good benefits that the government supports low-income families with. My mom was the only person that was supporting the family at the time, and she herself was an immigrant with little to no English. And so, again, just to answer your question, is I never really thought I could even go to college. When we moved from Texas to Washington State, literally border to border almost. My high school counselor, I don't think really understood the potential that I had in terms of academic futures, and didn't really prepare me help me prepare for college. I didn't take any calculus or physics or anything like that in high school. I didn't even take calculus, and so when I was about to graduate from high school, again, I thought I had research options like the military, like community colleges, tech schools, vocational schools, because I also couldn't afford college. I didn't have the means to pay for college, let alone think about, all of the other expenses that come with college. And so I was very lucky. I think things happen for a reason. I was part of a church, a Catholic church that had a youth group. And the leader of that youth group happened to be the first Native American to graduate from the University of Washington in Seattle with a degree in mechanical engineering. It just so happened. And so when he asked me what I was going to do after high school, I told him I didn't know. I couldn't afford college. And he said, you know, I know some people at the university. Let me take you there. And the University of Washington, Seattle was 90 miles south of my hometown of Bellingham, Washington. And he introduced me to a lady who asked me, you know, are you interested in engineering? And I told her, I said, I don't know what it is. And she said, well, if you're interested, you know, we have scholarships for women that are interested in engineering. And I basically told her, sign me up. It doesn't matter what it is. I'll figure it out. If that helps me to get into college, that's what I'll do. So that's how I came into STEM, you know, really as a way to get into college and, you know, an opportunity really to try something new that could help me sort of leave poverty behind, you know, everything that I knew up until that point. So again, I didn't even know what engineering was. And then once I was in that sort of learning path, if you will, I was talking to some folks that I knew and I had met, and they told me, whatever you do, don't go into electrical or aerospace because those are not for women. And so to me, that was like, really? Okay, well, I'm going to go for electrical. Because I always liked tinkering with electronics, and it just sounded like the closest thing. Again, this was many years ago. You know, computer engineering was not a field in itself. It was sort of part of electrical. So it was kind of, if you were interested in computers, that's where you went. So I challenged that perception, and I applied to the Department of Electrical Engineering after my sophomore year, because at that time, at least at the University of Washington, you couldn't just choose a major and be in the major. You had to take 2 years of all the required courses in order to apply to the department. And again, I was lucky enough to get into the department and graduate with a bachelor's, you know, a few years later. So that's how I came into my major, and then of course after that I applied for jobs in that space. So that's how engineering came into my life. It wasn't something that I intentionally chose, you know, or something that I had dreamed about. I didn't even know what the word meant. I didn't know what people did. And then once I was in school, it was mostly men. You know, I was often the only woman sometimes in my classes, or, you know, a very small number of women in my classes. So, and then of course, when I joined the profession, it was sort of the same thing, you know, more men, more older men, hardly any women. So I hope that answers your question. It's a little bit of a long story, but.
Oh, it absolutely does. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, that is amazing. You're able to overcome that language barrier, financial barrier, being in a totally new nation when you're that young. That's really inspiring to all of us. So thank you so much for sharing your story. And our next question was actually, did you have your career path all planned out from the start? And I think you sort of touched on that. I think a lot of people, especially my age, I'm pressured to think, I need to know exactly what I want to do. I need to know exactly how I'm going to get there. And the next question was, did you know exactly where you wanted to be and exactly where you wanted to go as a teen? It seems like engineering was sort of like a chance that it just happened. Do you have anything more to add to that?
Yes, I mean, life is full of twists and turns. You know, as much as you can plan, sometimes life throws you, you know, some curveballs, and you have to figure out how to respond to them. I think the biggest thing that I learned, you know, without even knowing what engineering was, is that I did have an engineering mindset. And what I mean by that is I like solving problems. And when you boil it down to its root, that's what engineering is using science tools to solve real life problems. And again, you know, when I was younger and I didn't have any money, I would open up the television when it wasn't working to try to figure out how to make it work. I didn't have tools. I used forks and knives and whatever I could find. I also, would try to fix my hair blow dryer, and just things like that, because we couldn't afford to buy new. So I always try to tinker and try to fix things, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I really liked to solve problems. And because I was so young when I started working, and I left my house when I was 16. I was always trying to figure out how I'm going to pay rent, where I'm going to work. I did a lot of jobs, after school. And so I was always working. Even through school, I was working. But I had to kind of figure out on my own, excuse me, how to get a place to live, how to buy food, I had a car, so I had to pay insurance and gas. So I had to figure all of that on my own. And I think, again, my brain just sort of always was thinking about how to solve the problem. Again, I was very fortunate and blessed in having a lot of mentors along the way, people who were willing to help me. If I didn't know something, I would go and research it and find people who could help me. I would never just, feel like, the earth was just disappearing from under me and I was in crisis. I don't like being in crisis mode. Again, I'm a doer. So I always think, okay, I'm in this problem. How can I solve it? Where do I need to go? Who do I need to call? And remember, there's no internet, there's no cell phones at the time that I was growing up. So I really had to use my 2 feet to get me to places and ask questions in person and find information and go to the library and go to the Office of Financial Aid and, whatever I needed to do to get by. So I think at the end of the day, again, being a problem solver was really what helped me be a better engineer and understand finally what engineering was all about.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's incredible. Like the fork and like knives, the hair, I mean, it just kind of foreshadows like your whole life, and that's incredible because you didn't know it at the time.
Yeah, I also really liked how you touched on the importance of your network and collaborating with others. I think it's also a stereotype that people in STEM or academia in general, they're very like isolated and they're on their own track trying to do everything themselves, like competing with everyone else. But I think collaborating is sort of the essence of STEM. So that I really liked how you touched on that as well. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we're never alone if we seek help and we're willing to accept help and, not be too proud to accept and seek that help. There's always a lot of really good people that are willing to help you if only you have the courage to ask. So like I said, I always look for solutions. I'm a solution-driven person. I don't like to wallow in crisis or being paralyzed, by problems. And again, that also forced me to grow up very quickly, and kind of knowing how to survive on my own.
Right. Well, just getting the questions more career specific. You said you were you used to be in electrical engineering, but now you're in a different science. But in either topic, what are some specific research projects or topics you've worked on, or any exciting projects that you're passionate about?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. Even though my field was in electrical engineering, I was introduced, like my first actual professional job in a big company was at Xerox. That company used to be known, and it used to be really big because of the copiers, right? They invented the process of copy and Xeroxing documents and printing. I mean, they're pioneers in this space, in this field. Also, the Xerox Research Park, they actually invented the first computer, the first, and the mouse, and just a lot of innovation out of that research facility. But when I first joined Xerox, I joined the research team. And my very first project was really exciting because, again, this is way before your time, but everybody used to have printers at their desk connected physically, through a cable to their computers. Network printing was just starting to take hold. And so I worked on sensors that would, I did research to figure out what were the best sensors to detect the type of paper that was in the drawer. You know, whether it was, again, transparencies at the time, or if it was yellow paper or white paper or blue paper, green paper, you know, different colors, different thicknesses of paper. And so I helped a research team, again, sort of figure out what combination of sensors and light sources could give us the information we needed to detect the type of paper that was in the drawer. That, again, you know, it seems simple, but now that, you know, we don't even use printing hardly anymore. But at the time, network printing and the savings that came along with that, right? Because again, 90% of the time you didn't use your printer. So sharing a printer was sort of a new concept where people could all share a printer. But people didn't like the inconvenience of walking up to the printer and making sure everything was ready before they sent their jobs there. So that was, again, one of the really exciting projects that I worked very early on my career. And it included, you know, participating in applying for a patent, you know, so recent out of school, being in that work was really exciting. But that was only like a rotational job at the very beginning of my career. After that rotation in research, I went to manufacturing. And again, manufacturing is a whole other world when it comes to engineering. It's real time, you know. I mean, machines need to keep running so that they can produce products so that the company can sell it and make a profit. And so I went into manufacturing, and I started kind of as a systems person, developing applications and programs to help improve the quality of the products, to detect defects in the line, to document those defects and create databases. So again, this was before we know computing as we know it today. Everybody used to have all their applications in their computers, in their like physical towers of computers at their desk. There was no laptops at the time. And so that went from that. And so working on projects that, again, found that introduced ways of housing all the applications on one computer so that many people could share them instead of housing them in your own computer. That was a concept called client server at the time. And because I was a systems person, you know, I also learned how to design databases, how to design systems, how to design interfaces that end users could interact with. And so even though it wasn't research necessarily, again, you were doing things that were kind of new and on the edge of technology at the time. So that was another really interesting project in terms of building systems. And then more recently, you know, with my jobs at Intel, I joined Intel initially as an industrial engineer, even though my major has never been industrial engineering. But again, when you work in manufacturing, you know, through your job, you experience a lot of different roles, even if they don't exactly match your major. So I had this industrial engineering experience because I had been in manufacturing. So I learned a lot of those concepts on the job. And when I came to Intel, I did that for a little while. And then I went into process engineering, which is more specific now to my major, semiconductor manufacturing. And the processes, again, just working in an Intel fabrication facility is like working in a space station. I mean, the requirements, you know, the clean room, you know, you can't introduce any minute particles into the clean environment because the processors that are like the size of your pinky nail, you know, it has billions of processors. So like a drop of sweat, a little thing, a particle of skin or anything that drops on those things, like kill the entire process. So it's just an amazing technology. I mean, few people in the world, you know, get to see how these microprocessors are manufactured. And these microprocessors run everything that we know of today. You know, the cloud would not be possible without microprocessors. You know, smart cars, Internet of Things, you know, virtual reality, I mean, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, all of these things came from, you know, companies like Intel, where I work now. You know, they made all of these technology innovations possible. And again, being part of all that, and being part of the actual process that built these microprocessors that went out to the world, that was another great project. And again, it's just a whole, it's a whole different level of game when it comes to trying to solve problems that your eyes can't see, that are atomic in nature. And you have all of these very expensive equipment and electron microscopes and machines that occupy, entire, buildings, to like lithography and etching and all of these processes, because they're etching into sand, basically, to make this microprocessor. So, I mean, that whole technology is just so captivating to me. And again, this is what made the internet possible. I remember when I was in school back then, people started talking about this thing called the World Wide Web, and nobody really knew what it was. Different times. Again, being a witness to this growth in technology, to me, has been, kind of a unique opportunity to be on the side of technology that creates, the means for people to connect together and to do things, to communicate, to keep them safe, and all of these things. Again, I think life has a weird way of happening sometimes, and I found myself in these sort of situations because of my personal life that sort of walked me. I mean, I never thought I would work at Intel, but through life circumstances, I found myself at Intel. I never, actively looked to join Intel. That wasn't in my mind. Oh, I want to go work for this company. It was life circumstances that led me here. So I think we all have different paths and different life circumstances that happen to us. And it's about what we do when those things happen, about the decisions that we make. Do we take the easy path, or do we take a challenge? So hopefully that answers that question.
It does, thank you. And you seem so passionate about what you do. It's just amazing to listen. I think Amanda is going to ask you the next question.
Yes, I have the next question. That was an amazing response. So we read that you recently completed your PhD, right, in
Yes.
human and social dimensions of science and technology. So congratulations, that's an amazing accomplishment. That's awesome. So, and I came up with this question because I'm very curious. I think it's actually sort of a myth that people see STEM and like the humanities as two like totally separate fields. Like you're either a STEM person or you like humanities. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit to the interconnectedness of STEM and the humanities, or maybe like
absolutely
science and social science. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Again, back in the day, and even today to some extent, engineering is very isolated from the humanities. And mostly it's due to the amount of information that, you can fit within a 4-year degree. There isn't a lot of time to incorporate a lot of other things outside of what you need to become an engineer. There are some electives, every college has electives, but they're very minimal. So when after about 12 years of working in manufacturing, in the fabrication of microprocessors, I noticed that, again, there weren't a lot of women in manufacturing at Intel. And I remember when I was in college that somebody somewhere at some conference, said by the year 2005, we will have reached parity in gender representation for engineering. And I was looking around, and I didn't see how that could be possible. So I started asking questions, and the answers that I was getting were not satisfactory. It's like, where are the women? And then I started looking at the data from the National Science Foundation on, graduation and education statistics. And it just showed me that the trend of women graduating with degrees in engineering was flat. And it's been flat for over 50 years. I mean, it's incredible. Despite, probably billions or trillions of dollars invested in increasing that representation over the years. And so that's when, the thought of going back to school really triggered in my mind. I wanted to go find out why this was the case, and why wasn't anyone being held responsible or accountable for making absolutely no progress. And so when I started to think about, again, the intersections between technology and social science or humanities, I realized, what I didn't understand was the people side. What drives cultures, what drives how we define and identify ourselves. How do we decide what kind of careers we should look at? What are the things that get in the way? And again, I didn't have the academic knowledge to answer all those questions. So I decided to go back to school, and I did all of this part-time. I never took any time off to go back to school full-time. So while I was working, I was going to school and taking courses that made me think differently. I'll be honest, at first, when I started taking some of these social science courses, I didn't understand what they were talking about. It was like, again, a whole different planet. I couldn't understand the language. I had to read articles 2 or 3 times. I had to look up every other word, because the language of academics is so different from, engineering. Engineering is formulas and technical terms and everything that I was used to. And so I had to re-educate myself and really try to understand, again, sort of the human side of what is causing this problem to persist, because it's not the technology. And I had heard, again, at the time, this was almost 10, 11 years ago, when I went into the research, they would, the research would cite sort of the same sort of reasons why there weren't more women in engineering. And it was all, well, we don't have enough role models. Well, girls don't like math. Well, engineering is too hard. Women don't like hard subjects. And I was like, this is all babble. I don't believe it. I don't believe those are the reasons why we don't have more women. There's got to be something else, because it almost point in most of the research that was available at the time is changing now. But at the time, it was, pointing to the women. Like, we had projects about how to get more women into engineering, but mostly the women were doing the work. Most of the women were doing the research. And most of the research was, what's wrong with these women? What's wrong with us that we can't get into engineering? And again, I don't think we are the problem. I always said, girls are not broken. They're not deficient. Girls can achieve anything they set their mind to. There is something inherently problematic about engineering that women don't like about it. And women have no problem going into the sciences and the medical field, which law, other fields that I think are equally challenging, if not more. So it's, because they always, again, every time I heard men talk, it was like, well, women are not suited for engineering. And I'm like, no, that's BS. That I don't believe that. I think that the problem lies in the systems. I think the problem lies in the culture. Things that we keep perpetuating, the roles of men versus women, how we see each other, how we interact with each other, all of those things, how we are raised in our families, is still very much gendered. Even in today's day and age, in some families, they're still very traditional about the roles of men and women. In some cultures are still very traditional about the roles of men and women today in the 21st century. So when I started to look for programs that would help me understand that lack of representation of women, specifically women of color, that's when I because I live in Phoenix, I went to Arizona State University and I just did a search and I came across this program, and I again immediately picked up the phone. There was a contact number, a name. I called them. He happened to answer the phone when I called. And he was the director of the program, and I explained to him who I was, what my research questions were, what I wanted to do, and was this the right program for me? And what I came to find out is this particular program, and ASU is known as an innovative university as well. They took people like myself with, physics and engineering and technical backgrounds and helped us understand how, engineering technologies were affecting people and humans, and how, depending on who came up with the product or who came up with a solution, it could be biased because there was no other perspectives brought into that product development or into that research. They always say, well, research is never objective because depending on the bias of the researcher, that's what the outcomes are going to be. So what I enjoyed about the program is we had a lot of people like myself trying to understand the human side of things. Again, how does solar energy impact communities with low income? Because they can't afford solar panels. So there's all these, sort of interactive questions between technology and who can afford them, and who are they designed for? And then you also had a lot of sort of social scientists who were trying to understand the impact of technology on people, on society, on culture. So this was a really nice hybrid of a program where I felt right at home. But like this, there are now many programs, across many universities that in many departments are now trying to create new centers of excellence or new schools of thought, on how to merge both technology and humanity, because they're not separate. They go hand in hand. If you don't understand one side, how can you be a good engineer? So I like the fact that, again, 10 years or 20 years after I graduated with a technical degree, that opportunity would have never been available to me at that time. But today, you can see there's a lot more convergence between the technology areas and the social science areas. And there's a lot of programs that combine the two in some way.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that there are more programs and that intersection is expanding. So yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and then that was mostly a question for like Amanda's curiosity, but a question that I had was, and I think you touched on it a little bit, like experiences like that you had like difficulty in as being a woman, and I know you said that there's like you had to confront ideas, but were there any like other like experiences or like stories you've like had to overcome?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when you're a person like me that has, these intersecting identities, right? I'm Mexican, I'm an immigrant, I'm a woman of color, I have Asian background, I have a Native American background, I have, different, I've experienced different socioeconomic status throughout my life. There's a lot of, it's very nuanced, and it's complex, right? I'm, as a person, very complex in my makeup and in my identities. So oftentimes in my earlier career, I wasn't sure if I was experiencing something because I was a woman, or because I was Mexican, or because I was a Mexican woman, or because I was poor. I didn't know what was driving some of the experiences that I had. Excuse me. But some of the things that I experienced, I mean, again, as a woman, in general, being raised as a gender woman, before we had anything other than binary gender identities, and everybody was either a man or a woman in the eyes of society. I think that, like when I was in high school, I think the bias was because I was poor, and perhaps because I was Mexican, not necessarily because I was a woman. When I had my first experience outside of, when I graduated college and I went to work, I remember, I mean, and this was explicit, my first supervisor told me, I need to tell you something. I'm not, I'm not happy that you are part of my group. This was in my research group, because I don't think highly of Mexican people. And he told me that. He told me what his perception and stereotype were of what Mexican people did or were. And I set out to prove him wrong. And thankfully, right before I left, he said, I wish I could keep you. You've really changed the way that I think about race. And right before I left, he's like, and just to show you, I think he goes, I'm going to take a vacation in Mexico, to try to understand better. So I was really happy about that. But again, I don't think that had to do with me being a woman. Now, in the labs during that time, again, you have to think this was over 25 years ago. I remember walking into the labs of the engineers that I was working with. And of course, there'd be calendars of women in bikinis or, things like that. Just very male, kind of a cave, man cave kind of a feeling. And I felt uncomfortable, and of course, I mean, I also experienced some sexual harassment. I had a coworker that was trying to get my attention, even though I had explicitly explained to him, that I was not interested, and he did some things and was terminated because of the things he did, and I reported. So I did experience some sexual harassment in my early career as well. And when you're working around men all the time, you have to grow very thick skin, and also don't becomes kind of the weaker sex in a gender sense. When I was in college and when I was in my all my career, most of my friendships and relationships in terms of colleagues have been with men. So I think I've always, one thing that I've always kept as rules for myself, I don't date anybody I work with, I don't go to social gatherings and overdrink or behave in a way that's not appropriate, because all of that gets back to the work, the work environment, how you behave socially, if you're, with colleagues or people at work. I mean, men as big gossips as women, sometimes even more. They'll turn a story and make it even worse. And again, in a factory with 10,000 workers and a ratio of like 10-1 or something like that for women, it's easy for men to assume things. And so again, I always behaved in a way that I would feel comfortable, and that also allowed me to be very honest and transparent with my male counterparts and my male friends, because if they had any questions or they weren't sure about something, there was enough trust that they would ask me, things, and then I would tell them my opinion, my perspective, as a woman, right? But I never used gender as a, sort of as a weapon. I always try to understand also their perspective and their side of things. But I always, again, always kept it in the professional sense. And even, like I said, even during the times where I had to get to the point of filing a sexual harassment complaint, I tried to deal with it on my own first, to try to get the gentleman to, to understand and come to terms with it without having to involve, HR and legal and all these other. I tried because I didn't want to get him in trouble, but that didn't work. All of my efforts, unfortunately, didn't work, and it got a little bit scary. So that, again, once he kind of crossed that threshold of safety for me, that's when I said, okay, I've given you every opportunity, and I've tried to tell you in many different ways that this is not appropriate. I'm going to have to do something about it, right? After I had exhausted all of my options not to do something, that was more escalated. But those are examples. Again, more recently, I can't, other than, again, yeah, I work in an industry that is still very much male dominated. There's still misconceptions, there's still myths, there's still stereotypes, because we still have an aging population in very senior leadership positions across the industry that still think of in a certain way. But I've also seen a lot of men who have daughters, mostly, who want a different world for their daughters. And I see them often take, the lead and the charge in helping the men to kind of, change the way that they think about the role of women, both at home and at work. So I haven't felt felt it like I did, 10, 20 years ago. Because I think it's more like through microaggressions, or really, honestly, just through lack of knowledge or ignorance. They don't know what they don't know. They don't do things. Again, I always take people doing everything with positive intent. Sometimes they say things or do things that they don't realize are being received in a different way than the way that they meant it, right? Sometimes they don't see the wrong in what they're doing because they have a blind spot, right? And so they're not doing it out of mischief or trying to hurt you. They just don't know. So I think educating our men, and I always say this, the problem with women representation in engineering is not a women problem. It's a men and women problem. And men need to be part of the solution. It can't just rest on the shoulders of women to fix this. Men are a big part of the problem as well, and they need to be accountable for their contributions to this lack of representation.
Wow, I mean, I love how that you just try to tackle like misconceptions head on. I find that so inspiring. As a girl interested in STEM, I want to do the same thing, I guess. Like, it's just so inspiring that you've made it and you've tackled those problems. And I bet you still face those problems today, but
they're more subtle though these days, right? Because there's again, it's the awareness about it is so huge now with social media and everything, that I'm not a highly political person, but I mean, just as an example, right? When President Trump took office, he sort of enabled, people to come out of the woodwork and be more genuine about who they were. Whereas before they would feel that way, but they wouldn't have the courage to show their true selves, right, to the world. And so I think there's always a silver lining in everything that happens. I think that allowed us to know really who's who, because people, again, felt more courageous about being the kind of person that they've been hiding for so many years. And then you can deal with it, right? And then you can confront it and you can address it and you can try to resolve it, at least if you know that it's there. But if it's hiding, it's hard to get at it. I always take the approach of wanting to help find common ground, right? We may be different, but there's always common ground where we can agree on things, even if we don't believe in the same political party, or if we don't believe in the same religion, or if we don't believe, certain cultures and norms apply the same. We can have healthy discussion. We can learn from each other. I always take that approach. Again, it would have to be pretty extreme for me to think that something was sexist or racist, or, I always take the side of, they're just ignorant. They just don't know. I've helped educate many. I remember having a conversation with somebody at the hair salon where they were talking about, and again, sometimes they don't know I'm an immigrant right off the top, about all these, especially in Arizona, about all these Mexicans coming over and taking advantage of all the social services and not contributing and blah, 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 and they were just going on a rant. And I was just listening, to them rant. And then after they were done, I asked respectfully, it's like, would you be willing to hear a different opinion? And, if in that case, the gentleman was like open to it. And I said, did you know that, many illegal immigrants with illegal Social Security numbers are contributing to your Social Security, yet they'll never see a cent. They pay taxes, maybe, again, illegally, but they do pay taxes, and they can't ever claim those taxes. So there are things that immigrants contribute that you may not be aware of. And he wasn't aware of those things, right? He hadn't even thought about it. And I said, I mean, and again, you'll be hard pressed to find a Mexican person who doesn't work. They're not out begging, they're not out robbing. They're, again, in general, I'm talking, right? I mean, one of the things that's beautiful, I think, about the Mexican culture is that we work ethic. In that same, pride that we have from our culture doesn't allow us to take charity to well. You know, if somebody offers us, it's like, okay, what can I do for you? You know, how can I work this off? Is kind of part of the general culture. Again, there's always bad people in every culture. That's for sure. But to generalize it to an entire population based on, you know, just what you've heard and never really having experienced it yourself is a little bit unfair, you know. And like I said, I try to, and that's also why I went back to school, because I remember a lot of my guy friends who are engineers, again, they would use the same type of narratives, like, oh, well, girls just don't want to take hard classes, or, oh, girls just don't like math, oh, you know, girls are not set up for engineering. And I'm like, how do you know? I said, what girls? And they would go, well, you know, look at what's happening. And I wouldn't have any tools to defend that or to debate it even, you know, because I had no knowledge. It was just like, I don't think so, you know. But and they would go, well, what proof do you have, you know? And I was like, well, let me go get you some proof. You know, those kinds of things. But again, there's always bad apples in an orchard, and it, you know, if you only listen to those bad apples, you know, you'll be depressed all the time in an engineering role or in a science role. You always have to think about, okay, you know, how can I turn this person around? How can I help them? And how can they help me understand their point of view as well? Because I mean, their point of view didn't just, you know, appear by magic. They had to have certain experiences that got them to believe what they believe. And maybe they had some negative experiences, you know, but they, like my supervisor at Xerox, you know, he had one negative experience, and then he sort of used that as a blanket, you know, perception and stereotype of who he thought Mexican people were. And so I always try to bring it down to the individual, because again, even as individuals, we have a lot of intersecting identities, you know, it's not just one thing. And I often find that even with people where we like bump heads all the time, I always try to find that common ground. I'll give you another story. I had an engineer at Intel that refused to share his data with me, you know, and he was required to, because I was the industrial engineer for his area. And every time I would ask him for data, he would ignore me, just ignore me. And I couldn't do my job. And at first I took the probably the not best approach, which was, oh, well, you don't want to give me your data? I'm going to go talk to his manager and his manager's manager and anybody else who will force him to give me his data, whether he likes it or not, right? That was the approach. It's like, oh yeah, okay, you know, this is what I can do, and just kind of go toe to toe. And of course, that created more tension and more friction in the relationship. And I did that for like years. I'm like, this wasn't just, you know, a few weeks or days, and I couldn't get through. You know, I couldn't break through to him, you know, that we were a team and that we needed to work together. And so I'm like, okay, I give up, you know, this fight of power, you know, because it was a power struggle. And again, I would have never understood this if I hadn't gone back to school and figured it out. But it was a power struggle. I wanted power, he wanted power, and we couldn't share in that power. So I started talking to people who got along with them. And I'm like, how can you get along with this person? You know, I can't find a way to break through. And they just said, well, you know, have you taken the time to get to know him as a person outside of, you know, just outside of his title, outside of his position, outside of his role? And I'm like, no, you know, I don't think I have. So the next time I met with them, I was like intentional. I'm like, we're not going to talk about work. And again, this was a man, again, who believed that he had all this power and he wanted control, you know. So I took a different approach. And so the next time I met with them, I brought down, you know, kind of my own wall and resistance. And I asked them to mentor me. I said, you know, help me understand. You know, you are so knowledgeable of, you know, he was a process engineer at the time. It's like, I want to learn, I want to, you know, grow up to be you. And, you know, so I started to stroke his ego a little bit, and that kind of calmed him down. And then we started talking about things we had in common, and I found that he was a big, he liked movies. You know, he was into movies and watching movies, and I'm like, oh, so am I. You know, let's talk about what movies have you watched recently, and so we started having that conversation and that relationship. And I'll tell you, after that meeting, he goes, what data do you need? You know, it was incredible.
Wow.
I think again, you sometimes forget that at the end of the day, people are people, regardless of their titles or their positions inside a company. You know, once you find that common ground, whether it's something that's work related or not, you start to form those trusting relationships, you know. And once you have that trusted relationship, people are more willing to work with you and help you be successful. So again, I think in a world of engineering, you know, males are not our enemy. We just need to figure out how to work with them and not generalize. Again, I treat every individual as much as I can the way they want to be treated. And I learn from them, and I always give them permission that if I do anything that offends them or it's received the wrong way, to call me on it, you know, and help me understand. So I think that has a lot to do with my own experiences in engineering. Is I've evolved as a person, but only because I've learned either on the job or I've been illuminated through my education in some way.
Yeah, that was an amazing story. My mom always tells me that relationships are so important, like even in work, like you're saying, at school, family, just relationships are very important. And I also really liked the salon story. I also think it's really important that when people have beliefs, they're not in this sort of like echo chamber of just reinforcing their own beliefs. And I think that's a really good model for us to, if we disagree with someone, we can respectfully tell them why and sort of get a debate going, rather than have them reinforce that belief. I think that's a really great model. Yeah. And so our very last question, and then we're done. We want to be respectful of your time.
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay, great. So it's kind of like a double question, but you could sort of tackle either one or both. So the first one is, if you could say anything, this is kind of a tough one. If you could say anything, what would you say to your high school or teenage self? And then the second one is, do you have any advice for girls or students who want to get involved in your field of interest? So if you want to tackle both, one or the other, yeah.
You know, I think if I had to do things over, you know, again, if I were to give advice to my high school self, it probably would have been to be more fearless. I was always afraid because, you know, I was afraid to talk. People thought that you know, it was so funny. My last year in as a senior, you know, when you have your what is it, annual, your yearbook, and you go around and have people sign it or whatever, you know. Again, I don't even know if that's a practice anymore, but it was a big practice back then. Yeah. You know, you had your yearbook and you wanted people to sign it. And I had learned enough English, right, to get by, but I got a little bit more confident towards the end of my senior year. This is after 4 years of high school. And I remember people telling me, oh my God, we thought you were so stuck up because you didn't talk to anybody. And we just thought that you thought you were higher and mighty and better than everybody. And that's why you didn't talk to us. And I said, no, actually, the reason I didn't talk is because I was afraid I was going to say something and come out the wrong way, or people would make fun of my accent, or, you know, I was very, you know, self-aware that if I said the wrong thing, I didn't want to be ridiculed. I didn't want to be made fun of. And so I just basically kept to myself and I didn't talk very much. But it's, again, those perceptions, you know, of people who thought, you know, I didn't talk to them because I thought I was better than them, and that was never the case. And so I would say to just be more willing to take a little bit more risk with people. You know, I didn't have as much problem taking risks in life in general, but when it came to people, I was very protective of myself. and I didn't develop trust in relationships. I think I had like 2 friends in high school in all of my years that I could really call friends. And then I just, and that was a realization that I had even, but after I graduated. So in college, I tried to be a lot more of an extrovert versus an introvert. So that's the only, I think one of the key advices is just to trust people a little more. I was, again, very blessed that I had a lot of people who helped me along the way. But I think that this was my fate, to become an engineer, to live engineering, to understand what engineering was about, to go through an engineering education. So then in my second part of my career, I could then talk about it from a firsthand experience, having gone through it myself. Maybe the only other piece of advice that I would have given myself is to know more about what I wanted to do, right? Because again, I was more of and I don't know if I can say this, but I felt like a victim of circumstance to some extent. I let things happen to me versus me making things happen. And so I just went with the flow, it's like, hey, any opportunity that came my way, I try to take advantage, but I didn't know what I was aiming for. I think the only big goal that I had, early on when I was in high school is I didn't want to be poor, so getting out of poverty, however I could get out of poverty in a legal way, was really kind of like my goal, is to be an independent, self-reliant person. Didn't have to rely on a husband, on a boyfriend, on a mother or a father or a family member to provide for me. I wanted to be independent. And so again, I think being more trusting and giving people the benefit of the doubt at some points, and then also to be more fearless. So I think that answers part of your question, but I also think that, again, my life took these turns and twists for a reason, because I wouldn't be here today otherwise. The second one, I'm sorry, I forgot the question. What advice would I give? Yes. What advice would I give to people? And I talk to a lot of young people. And when I say young people, I mean, you are young people, but I talk to elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school students. Again, if I were to go back and think about what advice, is, again, don't let anybody tell you what you should or shouldn't do. I remember, because a lot of people say, oh, well, you have to be really good at math to do engineering. No, you don't. You have to love math to do engineering. No, you don't. I didn't like math, yet here I am. You have to think about things differently. I never enjoyed math in college. I probably enjoyed math to some extent in high school, but not in college. It got really difficult for me. I couldn't figure it out in my head. And I struggled a lot. I work hard. But if somebody had told me, if you don't like math, you can't be an engineer, and I believed it, again, I wouldn't be sitting here. So the way that I thought about it is like, math is a tool, it helps me exercise my brain, just like, a treadmill helps you exercise your body. I don't have to like math. I just need to know how to use it. Just like I don't need to learn how to use a hammer, I just need to know how to use it. So I started to think of math and physics. Physics was also, just really challenging for me. But I knew, again, these were tools. So I was just learning all the tools available to me, because engineering itself is about solving problems and figuring out what tools you need to solve the problem. So once I got past, even chemistry, I enjoyed chemistry, but I wasn't really good at it, And so all of the things that people put in your brain that, oh, if you don't do well in science and math and physics, you can't be an engineer, that's not true. All it means is that if you don't like them, or if you're not as equipped, as other people are to get through that, you just have to work a little harder at that to understand it because when you get to the engineering part, I loved it. I loved engineering. I did so well in my classes. I enjoyed my classes because it was about solving problems. But I had to go through that first phase in order to get to that second phase. And a lot of people think that if you can't get through the first phase, you can never become an engineer. And I try to dispel those myths. That's really one of the things that I use as my main objectives, is to dispel myths when I talk to young people. So don't let anybody tell you, what you need to become what you want. And then the other thing is, again, a lot of kids don't know what engineers are. They don't, you can't picture in your head. And I always tell them, think of a time where you were at home and something broke and you needed to fix it and you went and fixed it. That's engineering. Think of a time when you find yourself in trouble and you need to get out of that situation and you kind of figure out a way to do it. That's engineering. So we're born engineers by nature. I mean, humans find ways to survive and fix problems every day. So we're engineers by nature. So the other thing that I tell young people is, everybody hammers into you, like you were saying, Amanda and Erica. It's like, you have to choose a major, you have to choose a career now, and you have to make all these decisions. No, you don't. I was telling people, especially young people, engineering, it's a tool. Engineering, it's a way to approach life in general. And I describe it as the golden movie ticket. With an engineering degree, you can do anything you want. You can start your own business. You can go into business. You can be a lawyer. You can be a dancer. I met this young lady who wanted to go into theater. And so she started with a theater degree and then realized that she could really elevate, her art and her passion if she learned some ways to use engineering and then bring that into the dance, like the costumes and things that, I don't know if you guys ever watch America's Got Talent, but some of the things that people do with basic engineering, knowledge is amazing, because now again you're connecting art and engineering. I mean, you can become a doctor once you have an engineering degree. You can do anything you want. It gives you the tools you need to be successful in life. No matter, like I said, that golden movie ticket, you can go watch any movie that you want, but you need that golden ticket. And so I always think, when you're not sure what you want to do, think about what you love to do. Sports, you name it. I mean, you name anything, and I can find you a way that you can connect engineering to that. Because engineering, all it is how to innovate, how to make it better, how to solve a problem. And in any field, I know that engineering gives you that little boost. So if everybody else in medical school comes with a biology degree, and that is the only thing that they bring, there are millions of kids who bring a biology degree. And when it comes time to select, they're going to look for what makes you different, what sets you apart, what makes you unique. And again, you may get a general engineering or a bioengineering undergraduate degree, and that will give you that boost to get you to medical school, if that's what you want. So I think engineering, again, gives you a certain advantage in life, no matter what career you choose to pursue. Again, whether it's in arts, whether it's in education, whether it's in technology, in law. I mean, there's a lot of patent lawyers that are engineers. So it just really depends. And that's what I tell kids, don't limit yourself to anything. Combine what you love and figure out how to use technology to help you. Because again, we are all surrounded by technology all the time. And rather than having to make a choice, it's not it's no longer this or that, is now this and that. You can combine, you can bring it together, you can do both. You don't have to choose one thing. Do what you want to do, but figure out a way that is going to make you successful in life, right? Because again, you can't just choose to, like I used to tell people, I thought I was going to become a landscaper at one point when I was in college, because I saw this guy raking leaves, not worrying about tests, not worrying about making money, not worrying about anything. He was just happy raking leaves. And I'm like, I'm just gonna go do that. You know, I mean, I don't have to have a lot of money. Money doesn't mean a lot to me, even though I did want to get out of poverty. I said, but I know how to be poor already, you know, and if I don't have all this stress, you know, of tests and exams and papers and grades, and I just want to be whistling and raking leaves. I mean, if that's what makes you happy, you know, if I had gone and done that, I probably would have come up with a rake, you know, that did all the work, and I just like a robot, you know, or because I would have always been thinking about how to improve something. But if that's what you want to do, then go do it. But you know, make it better using technology. Anything that you can think of, you can improve upon, and you can use your engineering training to help you figure out what tools you need to make that contribution. Because the last thing I'll say, you know, is I'm an unmarried woman. You know, I was married, I'm divorced. I've been divorced for many years. I don't have children. So that is something also that's unique to me. And I always thought, what's my legacy, right? What's going to happen when I pass on and there's no, you know, there's no tree, you know, no branch coming from me. What contribution am I making to this world? And if I can help somebody, you know, make better decisions, you know, I always also try not to push people, oh, you have to do engineering. No, you don't. But you need to have the information to make the best decision that you can for yourself. Even if engineering is not for you, you at least know why. Versus, I think right now, a lot of people shy away from engineering because they don't know what it is. So it's out of ignorance more so. So I'm a big proponent of making informed decisions. It doesn't have to be one that I want, but it has to be one that is best for you. But you have to have the information to make that decision, so that later in life, you're not like, if I had only known that, you know, I would have made a different choice. So I always encourage people to learn and to find information and to become educated about the options that they have so that they can make better decisions in life, and hopefully have a more productive and you know, I don't know, self-fulfilling life. So my way of leaving a footprint is by helping others. You know, that's the way that I'm going to do this, and that's what I've chosen for myself. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and even for myself, I'm sure Erica feels the same way, but right now I feel really inspired, I feel empowered, I feel energized just from speaking to you, and the fact that you speak to elementary schools, middle schools. I think you're already making a huge impact and contribution to the next generation as it is for doing things like this. And this blog post that's going to come out, more girls are going to read it, and I don't think you need to worry about a legacy or not. I think you definitely smashed it out of the park. So thank you so much again for your time.
Absolutely.
I'm so excited for this.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Again, anytime you know how to get a hold of me if you have any questions, or if you just need a sounding board, or, you know, a different perspective, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. Oh,
I just want to let you know that, like, engineering is definitely one of the options for me now. Like direct impact to me just right now. So you definitely are going to leave a legacy, at least on me.
Oh, well, great. Like I said, just consider it, because I'm sure that you can find a way to connect, again, whatever you're passionate about. Just one other thing I'll just mention to you, because this is a really hard question. I think it's asked all the time. What is your passion? And you're like, I don't know. How do I know? You know, how do I find out? And I'll tell you what it was for me. And that's when it kind of clicked for me. I used to work in the factory. You know, again, I did engineering for many years. The fabrication factories, at Intel are 24/7, 365. I mean, they're always running. And I used to be an engineer there. So I was always on call at night, during weekends. I had no life. I mean, it was all about the factory, keeping the machines running. So sometimes I would have 18-hour days or 28-hour days, you know, inside the factory all this time. And I would get home very tired. And again, that kind of job, it's not only physically exhausting, but it was also intellectually exhausting. So I would feel like a raisin by the time I get home, just squeezed out. And I would lay my head down, and I would get a call or an email from somebody saying, hey, you know, Gabby, we have a class of 5th graders that would love to talk to you about engineering. And I said, what time do I need to be there? You know?
Wow.
And so I knew, and you know, even back from college, I used to, you know, Seattle is the state of Washington is divided by the Cascade Mountains in the middle, and the climate is very different between Seattle and Eastern Washington. So Western Washington, Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is mostly agricultural. The apples, you know, Washington apples, Washington strawberries, all of those things. And there's a lot of immigrant families, Mexican laborers that migrate to Eastern Washington to work in the field, as we call in the field. I used to do that too when I was growing up. I picked berries, and I picked apples, and I picked blueberries and all kinds of things. So that's why I also knew I didn't want to do that, because that was very exhausting work. But I used to, during our spring break, instead of like going to Cancun and having a party, we would go to Eastern Washington, and we would go talk to kids in middle school, high school. And then at night, we would have these parent awareness nights where we would talk to the parents of the kids who were migrant workers. Because again, if you think about migrant workers, they're a family unit. And as a family, they work together. So the kids from these families would get up at like 5 a.m, go work in the field, then go to school, then come back from school, then work in the field, and then still try to do homework. So again, you know, a whole different life than most kids, you know, that get home, do their homework, play video games, you know, watch TV, enjoy maybe a sport activity. I mean, you know, with more privileged families. So these particular families, they depended on the income from all of their kids to survive. How could they let them go to college and not contribute to the family? You know, that was a loss of income for the family. And so we had to talk to a lot of these parents about, you know, it's the short-term sacrifice for the longer-term gain. You want your kids to do better than you, right? And again, especially the dads had a hard time letting their girls go away to college too. They wanted to keep them in the house, right? Or close by under their supervision. So, you know, knowing that I've done that for free all my life, you know, as a volunteer after hours during my career when I was an engineer, that also helped me to understand that this was my passion. This is the work that you're willing to do without getting paid. Mm-hmm. And you are willing to put in as many hours as you need to without getting paid. So if you think about that, I'm sure there's something in your life that you'd be willing to do without getting paid. That's your passion. Now, how did you connect that to something that actually helps you earn money for a living? Mm-hmm. Right? So I learned that much later in life. Again, I wish somebody would have explained it to me a lot sooner. And I probably would have taken a different path, but I also believe that if I did, I wouldn't be here today. So, you know, I think, again, things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
About that.
Go ahead, Erica. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. I'll just be thinking of that. Like that's so like thought-provoking. I'm definitely going to be thinking about my passions now based on you.
Yeah, think about what, again, because once you start working, you work for the rest of your life, right? To earn a living, to make ends meet, to have a house, to have a car, to have, you know, things in life. And you need to be in a job or a career that is rewarding for you. Otherwise, it's going to suck every day. You're not going to want to get up in the morning and go to work, you know, if it's just about the money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also have been struggling to define passion. Is it like something you enjoy doing? Are there different like nuances to it? So I really like that that definition, and then being able to connect to your passion to your work. That's sort of when you hit gold. And I love that. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Absolutely.
We
Like I
had-
said, anytime, I'm here for you.